of the first things that I like wives to know is that they're not alone, because generally speaking, in their emails or when I'm seeing them in person, they are really living in isolation with a very deep secret that's in their marriage, and they haven't really had safe people to talk to. So I really encourage them to think about where they can find someone to begin to share their story. For the wives who have attempted to get help, I think there's a mixture of responses that they've heard. Sometimes they go to their pastors or other couples within their church who they may have thought struggled with this addiction or even some of the sexual acting out issues. And many times they have found that the help they have gotten there has not been as helpful as they had hoped. Oftentimes they're just told in rather black and white ways what they could do to get rid of this pain that they're feeling. And what I'm finding is the solutions, while I think they are well-intentioned, because many of us who are facing someone who is in a great amount of pain often seeks to figure out a quick way to get them out of it. So black and white solutions might look like, maybe you could pray more. If you would just be more available to your husband, and I think most people are meaning sexually that way. Maybe your temper has gotten out of control and you really need to look at what that's about. In some way or shape or form, I think she often believes that if she could just be something different, that maybe these problems would go away and maybe her husband wouldn't have had them in the first place. Other times, I think there are people that are seeking to get her out of this pain and really suggest she leave the relationship, the quicker the better. And at least move out, to send some kind of message that this is really horrible behavior and she won't tolerate it. So again, the answers often that come for her are very black and white. And I think in her heart, she's really conflicted because, there's a piece of her that really loves her spouse and doesn't want her marriage to fail. And there's a piece of her that also knows that the decision her spouse has made are really very wrong and sinful, and it isn't all her fault. And so I believe for many women, they feel very stuck in the advice that they're often given because they want to love their spouse, they want to make their marriage work, and yet at the same time, they're very hurt. And they get more angry at any suggestions that it might be all their fault.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and I don't want to name books or name theories because I'm not here to be combative that way, but I have found when women start telling me some of the literature that they're reading in order to try to find help for themselves, and I mention things like, well, sometimes I've had some difficulty with some of the things that are said in those books because I begin to feel like I'm responsible for other people, including my spouse, to create their happiness or create the solution to their sexual acting out issues. And I begin to feel like that's an impossible task for me to do. So when books are out there asking wives more or less to figure out what they can do to give their husband self-esteem or to give them respect or to make them sexually satisfied in their relationship at any cost, I think at the soul level of a wife, she feels very destroyed and very hopeless because she knows that's an impossible task to do. So when I talk with her about, our belief that we want to all learn about how we grow individually to be responsible for ourselves, and out of that place, which is hopefully a place where we learn about our own personal growth, our own triggers, our own weaknesses, and the ways that we need to work on ourselves, that we can be better servers of our spouse with some of those things that they so desire, without being responsible for giving those, if that is clear about the difference. When I start mentioning those things to wives in our sessions together, it is amazing to me how many of them break down and start crying. Because at some soul level for them, they have heard these other messages so often, and they really don't know what to do with them because they want to be faithful in their walk with God. And yet they know they have tried many of these things and they have not worked. And they have not made changes in their marriage or their spouse. And so they simply don't know what else to do. I do encourage wives to try to get informed and educated about what addiction is. And, Certainly the slow path to that would be in therapy or with other people, being talked through, various things about addiction, but certainly they can help themselves and move the process along so much quicker if they will begin to read some of the literature out there about addiction. And to understand, my purpose in asking a wife to do that for herself is so she can begin to understand that she did not cause an addiction in her spouse. And I think at some, core belief in herself, she does believe that she probably has done something wrong, is something wrong that has created this horrific problem in her husband and now in their marriage. Even though she wants to not believe that, I think there are the core beliefs that she carries that prevents her from really believing otherwise. Well, trusting in general is going to be a huge part of this journey of healing, certainly figuring out how she can trust her husband again when there's been a lot of lying and secrets for, generally many, many years. But one of the things I like to focus on for myself and for the women I work with is how we begin to trust ourselves. And it is true that for most of us, while we may deny that we knew anything about a lot of what was going on for our spouses and that these secrets were there for many, many years, as we begin to talk about the reality then of information they now know, most of them say, now that I think back, I had a hunch about this time, and I had this feeling about that time, and the story that I was told about this situation didn't really match up. And there were numerous times when she and I was very much the same, denied my inner reality about my life. And the wisdom that was going on in my body, I simply ignored or somehow walked past because I think there's a part of me that really didn't want to believe, some of the things I was hearing and seeing, or I didn't want to believe the feelings that were coming up from experiencing that my spouse wasn't as connected with me as I would have liked. Well, I can't say enough about how much support I'd love for a wife to have. I know for myself in the very beginning weeks, I had no support other than my best friend who really didn't know anything about sexual addiction. And it was an incredibly lonely, painful time for me not to have anyone who really knew what I was going through, and I was so confused about everything. I had no idea where to turn, what was going to be the outcome of the devastation in our lives, and it was very, very scary. I encourage women today that there really is becoming a lot more help available. And there are many more pastors and therapists who are working with sexual addiction. There are support groups that are forming all over the country. There are therapy support groups also available to spouses. And I know that first step to go out and make some connection with someone who might know about this is incredibly frightening. Because, at that point, she's stepping out from the privacy of her own home and sharing some secrets about her life that I think could, for some, backfire. If the wrong people hear about it and begin talking about it, it can be scary for careers. It can be scary for kids who find out things they don't want them to know in the beginning. So who do you trust out there becomes a really big issue for women. Well, given that I was just in a therapy session yesterday with my longtime therapist, no, I don't believe there is necessarily ever a finish to therapy, or shall I say, the desire to continue to grow. And to me, that's what this journey is all about, whether you're working with a therapist, whether you've figured out ways with other safe people to work on your personal growth. Adversity in our lives, I believe, becomes the opportunity to allow God to grow in us and to continue to work on us to grow our personal character and relationship with Him and others. And so while this starts out as a huge adversity and the focus is very much about her husband's behavior, my hope for her would be that out of that she will find a place where she can begin to look at, what is it that happens to her when this kind of adversity hits her life? How is she reacting? How is she feeling? How does she deal with that? Why or why not? Why do some stay silent and some become raging and angry? How do we cope, when we're in a relationship where we're not as intimately connected with our husband? And by that I mean emotionally and spiritually connected with our spouse as we would like to be. And what are the messages we're carrying that prevents us from being able to speak our truths or even know who we are and why we're reacting the way we are? So this whole journey of recovery can be really a journey of examining her own life and enriching the kinds of relationships she can have, not only with her spouse, but with everyone, with her kids, at work, with friends, and certainly with God. And so when I think about this journey in that way, it is a lifetime journey. I always hesitate to tell that to women when I first meet them, because I think for some it's too scary to think that they're supposed to be working on something like this forever. But what I know is working on something like this that started out with sexual addiction eventually becomes really just working on my own life and continuing to become the woman that I hope God wants me to be. And what I know for myself also is that it has definitely enriched all the ways that I have learned how to relate to other people. Well, the loss you're referring to is, of course, the death of my twin sister just a couple of months ago, and it has been a huge loss in my life. I believe recovery has really helped me deal with this loss in my life because it's, first of all, helped me to really be clear about what my feelings are and to be able to talk about those with other people who can hear me. I also know that I could be real tempted to cope with such a huge loss in some really unhealthy ways to avoid the pain in my life. And instead, I am trying to lean into that pain and surround myself with people who can help me work through my feelings. That I've found is a healthy part of any kind of loss in my life, whether it's just a change of job, which I also had earlier on and included some losses, or if it's a devastating loss like the death of my sister or the death of some of the dreams of my marriage when I faced into our loss. Whatever it is, I believe this journey has really helped me to understand the purpose in grieving the losses in my life, and that it is a natural part of life to have loss and to be able to move through loss and fully engage in the sadness, anger perhaps, confusion of loss, so that God can prepare me for what will be next. And I know the scriptures remind me that, if I can allow my heart to be sad, I can prepare myself then to be glad in what he will be bringing me to do. So as doors seem to be closing, new parts of my life open up if I allow myself to really complete the grieving process. And I had no idea what grieving was about prior to recovery. I just thought there were days that I felt depressed. A lot of the time really didn't know why, couldn't name what my feelings were. I had no idea what my losses were. And so everything kind of got lump summed into this, I'm in a bad mood or I'm depressed. When I do believe a lot of what I was experiencing was loss of some sort or another. And as I got better at being able to identify that and work through the feelings, I found that there was something on the other side of that, waiting for me. It was kind of, again, my journey with God about what is the next piece for me in my life. Well, I was first introduced to Shattered Dreams when I read Larry Crabb's book by that title, Shattered Dreams. And it really helped me to look at the loss of the dreams I had created for my life, especially for my marriage, and the possibility that God was going to lead me to higher dreams with higher purposes in my life if I would surrender myself to the loss of my own fantasies. A safe community of other women is maybe different than what most of us think about when we think about a group of women we want to hang with. I mean, I know for me, typically it might have been the moms I knew in my neighborhood because our kids played together. It might have been a group of women in a Bible study at church. It might have been, a sister or a mom or cousins or somebody who, I'd spent a fair amount of time with in family reunions. But truly, a group of safe women becomes those people who can come into your life and you can truly share any of your feelings, concerns, behaviors, dreams, and not have people fix you, want to change you, or decide for you how you should be living. So these women become great listeners. And because they are on a path as well to examine their life and understand more about how to grow in their own life, they're not going to be there looking at you with all kinds of, fixing solutions. And that's a really different kind of community to be in. When we think about it, I think for most of us, we might not even recognize that difference until we finally have been part of a group of women where that's how they show up, accepting their own faults, talking about their feelings, being uncertain at times about decisions in their life, grieving, feeling sadness, the whole 9 yards of what it's like to be a human being and accept our weaknesses as well as our strengths and know that the struggle of figuring out that for ourselves is one that we are called to do with the support of other women, but not necessarily all the answers from other women. And that becomes a really different kind of community. Yeah. Well, I know in the beginning, when life was just shattering all around me and I was not sure about what any of the future would look like, it was really hard to wake up in the mornings and have any kind of hope at all. And in fact, I think for myself, trying to get myself out of pain as quickly as possible, it was a time that was rather scary because I maybe wanted to make quick decisions, which might have been moving on, getting divorced, whatever, just to get myself out of pain. So when I meet with women today, one of the things I like to share with them is that while they may be in that place and life seems very devastating, that there are some of us further along the road who have over time seen the transformation that can happen in our lives and the change that is always possible for not only us but for our spouses and the great potential we have for ourselves and our marriages, and that maybe someone like me, if I'm farther down the road, or other women they meet who are farther down the road, can hold the hope for them while they're in this time of tragedy. And I like to encourage women to find such a woman in their life, or two or three, so that they know they're not alone in terms of not needing to always feel hopeful about their day or hopeful about the last counseling session they had. They just need to know and look further ahead at someone who's made it and say, if that person can do it, then maybe it's very likely that I can as well. When I felt fully engaged in my therapy women's group, I would never have been able to find that group, I suppose, by myself, but we were kind of led there through help at the treatment center. When I got there and I began to really feel heard about what was going on in my life, and I saw that there were people that understood what I was going through, I really began to have a different kind of hope that was more long-lasting. And I truly was able to close the door, I believe, at that time on feeling like I had to escape my marriage in order to deal with the pain I was in the moment. So again, there's that community, that safe community of people that really get it and weren't trying to fix me, but simply lead me through that pain, help me understand what it was about, give a voice to it, and show me, because of other women in my group who were further along, that life can look very different than it was in the moment. I really believe that trust is ongoing, that it's not just a black or white moment when all of a sudden you do trust, when you haven't trusted for a long period of time. It's a process of not only learning how to trust other people and what to ask for if you don't feel like you can trust, but also looking for the intention of someone's heart, and I guess we're talking here about our husbands if they are the ones who have sexually betrayed. We're looking for the intention of their heart to want to be a different person in this marriage. And so is not only their heart in a different place, but also are their behaviors and choices beginning to match their intentionality. So rather than looking for perfect lives, we might be looking for lives that are in process of changing. Also, I think really the biggest part of trust is getting a lot clearer about how to trust myself. And what does that look like? Can I trust that I know what I know, even though I may not be told from someone else about specific information? And what I know today is my body speaks so loud and clearly about incongruencies in my life that, I can trust that I know what I need to know for myself, and that I will take care of myself and make the right decisions for myself, regardless of what life brings to me. That's a whole different kind of trust than waiting for someone else to live a perfect life so that then I can feel okay or I can feel safe. And that's the journey I want to take women on. Because as long as we hand our basket of trust over to someone else, whether it's our husband or anyone, an employer, a friend, we basically let go of the ability to manage our own life and to take care of our own life. And that never feels like a trustworthy kind of place for us, even though I think there are many that would like someone else's life and behavior to be the barometer of whether I'm okay. Trusting God for sure, and trusting God that He will give us what we need when we need it in order to handle whatever life brings us. And without being able to surrender and trust God in that, we'll lean too heavily on all of our own decisions, and our own feelings in the moment. And, trusting God that He does know everything we need. He does know all the information that's in our relationships. He will lead us to the right events, the right people, the right kinds of places where maybe what we need is just to be quiet and listen for His word so that we know what our next right step is. But whatever it is, our faith in the Lord is what will eventually be the one and only thing we want to trust to lead us to the life of peace that we're looking for. We have a lot of women that call or come in because they feel really stuck, that their spouse does not accept his problem as being serious or at least minimizes it in some way, and she becomes, at a place in her life where she's simply not satisfied with the kind of marriage they have. My advice to her is to get going with her own program, as we say here. You don't need to wait for your spouse to start. You can find a therapist, you can go to a pastor, you can find other women who are in this very same place walking this journey. And what I like to remind them is that by taking those steps for herself, she will get clear about what she needs to do for herself. It may not necessarily be leaving the marriage, although eventually it may. But what we say is, where there's indecision now and confusion about life and feeling really stuck, by getting help herself, she will get to a place where it gets very clear about what her next step should be. For some, it is divorce. For some, changing the way they do life, the way they respond to their feelings in their marriage is enough to encourage their husband to get help as well. Sometimes their husbands say, gosh, I really like the changes I'm seeing in you. Maybe I'll join you. And it's amazing how having that kind of patience to not make quick decisions, those black and white decisions that we're so prone to do in the beginning to get out of pain, again, will lead her eventually to knowing what the next right step is. I'm a huge advocate of full disclosure for a wife. For the wives I meet with, I know feeling crazy is a common remark I hear time and time again. And I do feel like for most of us, this craziness comes from a place where the real world we're living in does not match our internal world of what we've been feeling and sensing and intuiting. And frankly, some of that comes from the fact that the real world we have been told about is still full of lies or not disclosing the truth, at least. or partial truths. And whatever it is, it creates so much confusion in the spirit of a woman that she really literally starts feeling like she's going crazy. So disclosure is really important for that reason. I think she needs an opportunity to be able to sort out in her life, what part of her reality matches what part she has been feeling for a long time. Were there years when there were affairs going on, for instance, and was that a time when she was just feeling totally isolated and alone and left? Is that a reality or not for her? She needs answers like that. And that will really help her to be able to start trusting also her own wisdom. When she can finally say, well, no wonder I was feeling like that, because that actually was a time when my husband had been lying to me about this or that. She can then put together the reality of her life with how she's feeling, and that is a really good thing for her emotionally. But aside for that, is for the coupleship, we really believe that full disclosure of the total sexual history of her spouse is very important for the two of them to have a foundation that they can build on truth. They have a place where they can honestly say to one another, from this point forward, we know everything there is to know about this addiction. And we don't believe in disclosure just because we want to air all the dirty laundry, so to speak, of someone's life. We want it to be purposeful. And we have certainly found in working with couples, although it can actually feel like a setback for a time to have even more information than maybe a wife has for a time, that with support, and again, hopefully she has the support of other women or therapy or pastors, she can deal with the extra pain that may be coming from full disclosure and finally move on to a place of beginning to trust what's current in a relationship. No, I'm not talking about real graphic specifics. In fact, I just answered an email this morning with a woman that said, how do I get these obsessive thoughts out of my mind? About my husband being with other women and whatever it might be. And it is important, for us wives not to ask for specific information when all it will burn images on our brains of what has been done or what kind of women are involved or images of pornography that we cannot get out. Just as it has happened for our spouses, that images of their acting out are burned in their brains and that becomes their challenge to deal with that. We don't want that same kind of challenge by asking for too much information. But it is important to know whether there were people involved that we knew. It's important, I believe, to know how long certain behaviors were acted out, how long were affairs, if there were such things, were emotional affairs involved or not. So those kinds of general questions, I think, are really important for a wife to know. If acting out from a spouse included being sexual with another person, certainly that would require a wife to want to know so that she could be tested for any kind of STDs. So it would be important for the kind of acting out to be known so that she would know in what case, she would have some kind of medical issues that she needed to be aware of. It's always difficult to know how much to tell family, friends, and kids. I believe in time that, the importance of who you tell and how much you tell has as much to do with what kind of relationship you desire to have with these people. There is really not a lot of need to share a lot of information with people whose relationship is not one you can trust, or one who you really believe will hold that information and guard it with confidentiality. For those in your life who you do feel it's important to be as congruent and authentic as possible, and I believe that is one of the goals of our recovery, is to continue to be an authentic person, we will want to choose to share information with loved ones. When I think about sharing with my parents or Mark's parents, it became important for us that they knew what was going on in our lives because we very much cherished a close relationship with them. And we didn't want to have to pretend or not show up and be honest about significant things in our life because they didn't have the information of what was going on. With our children, it would be the same way. We would want to, at age-appropriate times, share information about what was going on in our family, with the hope that they would one day be able to trust us to talk with us about anything that was going on for them, and to know that we are not perfect parents, that we struggle in many ways too, and we don't want them having to guess at maybe what the tension is in our household. And many times kids without real information will guess about all kinds of things that are really not accurate. And or they may begin to act out themselves the energy of our home when we choose to have secrets in our home about what's going on. So there are really a lot of great reasons for sharing. We shared with our children some of the basics of what was going on as early as 10, 6, and 4 when Mark came home from treatment. A lot of people are shocked to hear that, but what I know is that I believe over the years it has established for us a foundation of teaching our kids not only can we face into problems and have some really tough times in our marriage, but what do we do when we get to that place? We've learned how to reach out for help. We've learned that we're not alone in our issues. And we've also learned that we can overcome this adversity if we don't isolate ourselves. And so those are lessons that we want our kids to know at any age. And we also want them to know that we want to be safe people in their lives. And so by modeling to them, hopefully, some of how we deal with adversity ourselves, we're teaching them that they can do the same. If you have recently found out information about your husband's sexual addiction, I really want to encourage you to find a way to get help for yourself, regardless of whether he's choosing to do so right now or not. The journey of healing from this devastating news is one that really is best served if both you and he can find help individually and as a couple. But if that isn't possible, you can begin this journey yourself by finding people who can hear you and, first of all, listen to you about the confusion and the pain and the devastation that this has created in your marriage right now. You can learn a whole lot of things about yourself, even if your spouse isn't ready to join you on this recovery. And you can, by getting safe people to surround you in this journey, help yourself know what the next best step is for you to take. I just want to encourage you to begin this journey for you, however that looks. Find a therapist who understands sexual addiction. Find a pastor who knows what you're talking about. Keep knocking on doors until you can find several people who can walk through this journey with you. And just know that there is so much to know about your life that is well beyond even the initial devastation of sexual addiction. Through this tragedy, I believe one day you will maybe be grateful to be able to say it threw you in a place where it gave you the opportunity to learn more about yourself and to grow in the journey that God's leading you on, to understand about how your character can grow and how you can enrich your relationships. If your husband joins you in this journey, it certainly can be one where you can transform your marriage and your life. But if he isn't, it's something that you can do for yourself for your own transformation. I know that to be true, and I know that all the relationships in my life are incredibly richer because of the work I've put in to understand, who I was and how I showed up in my marriage and how I want that to be different today. My prayer for you would be that God would bring people into your life to help you walk through this tragedy so that you won't be all alone.